Welcome to John's D&D vlog. It's episode number 17. Last week was really all about numbers, and wow, that really can drive you nuts. So today I was going to do something a little more artistic. I was going to talk about D&D art, but honestly speaking, when I think about D&D art, I don't think about any of the D&D artists. And I don't mean any disrespect to any of those guys, but you have to understand, at the time, right, back when D&D was first starting, it's the same way with everything, right? If you look at the first Magic the Gathering cards, the artists, some were okay and some were actually not so good, and they were all learning. Whenever you look at the beginning of a thing, the art tends to not be the best. I mean, if you look at old comics, it's not the best art. You just can't get the highest quality art at the very beginning, because first of all, you're just not paying good prices for art, right? But when we were young, this is what we were looking at, because Frank Frazetta stood out. I mean, he was so much different than anybody else who was out there. Everybody else was just kind of amateurish, you know. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to attack any of the early D&D artists, because I really am happy about what they did, but this guy was like a classic. I mean, it's like Rembrandt himself happened to be living in New York at the time and happened to have jobs doing illustrations for novels, for fantasy novels at the time. I mean, Frank was the beginning of it all. I mean, all of the art that when you go to the comic book shop and you look around, everything, all the art that you're going to see there came from Frank. In the same way that all fantasy novels kind of came from Tolkien, the way that fantasy art looks came from Frank Frazetta. So if I'm going to talk about fantasy art, I'm going to start here. And then maybe I'll talk about other guys later, because they all are good and they all had their influence and I respect them all, but Frank is where you begin. So I was just going to show you some of these books. So back when I was a kid, you'd get books that would look like this, right? And they were, honestly speaking, not very expensive. And it was just, when I first started looking at it, it was my brother who kind of got me into it. And, I guess I should have said this first of all. You're going to see naked women today. Some guys don't mind. Some guys mind. If seeing naked women bugs you, then maybe you should skip this blog, okay? All of this stuff, you can look at it on Google too. Just type in Frazetta and then look at the images and you can see tons of it. But there's just something. Frank, he got the ball rolling as far as just high quality, super high quality fantasy art. Nobody was doing what Frank Frazetta did. Boy, that glare is really in the way, isn't it? So Frank Frazetta, right? He was a fantasy artist. The thing is, he was more than a fantasy artist. He stood out from the norm so much that he was actually featured in this issue of American Artist from May of 1976. As a rule, it's hard to get the high-end artists to acknowledge that fantasy artists even exist. It's hard to get the high-end writers to acknowledge that science fiction even exists. As a rule, they don't even bother with something as low as fantasy or as low as science fiction. So in this issue of American Artist, where they gave Frank Frazetta the nod and touted him as a great artist, it's kind of proof to me that Frank was more than just the average guy out there making a living painting. He was doing something way out of the ordinary, something special. So anyway, I'm going to read you this article. It's in this magazine here. Before I do that, though, I need to explain something. I was just going to show you my copy of his book called Icon. I was just going to put a camera over my shoulder and flip through the pages, but I'm a little worried about fair use. If I show the entire book closely, I'm probably violating fair use rules somewhat. So instead, I'm just going to put up a bunch of small thumbnails of his stuff. These are all scans from his book, but hopefully they'll be small enough and the resolution poor enough that no one will mind me doing this. I consider this video to be kind of advertising for him, so I hope that the people who own their IP won't mind, right? My hope is that you'll go and you'll buy one of his books. Anyway, to encourage this, I'll put the URL for one of his books that's currently on Amazon here, right? Anyway, looking at thumbnails of Frank's art is great, but seeing it close up is even better, so please go check out the book. So here's the article, and like I said, I'm only going to read part of it. Frank Frazetta at Bat by Nick Meglin. It is rare that an illustrator reaches a point in his career where he He creates work, and the publisher searches for an appropriate text to fit it, and should he not find one to fit, uses it anyway. Frank Frazetta has reached this point, and the publishers who purchased first printing rights to his work are delighted to get it, gleefully admitting that a Frazetta cover guarantees success for them. His enormous appeal stems mostly from his unreal reality approach to make the unbelievable believable. It is precisely this quality that separates Frazetta's work from hordes of imitators who, like imitators of any artist offering a highly personal approach, fail to capture the essence of the work completely and channel their energies towards duplicating the obvious. Frazetta creates a color scheme, a building, a landscape, an atmosphere, a monster, a figure, a world that doesn't exist. His actions are extreme, his figures disproportionate, with muscles developed almost beyond human capability. His lighting often impossible, his animals exaggerated, his temples and palaces pure imagination, and he makes it all work. I see things as they exist, says Frazetta, but I paint them from the image they have left on my mind rather than how they appear in reality. For instance, if you really examine your fears, you realize how out of proportion they are. Your mind's eye constantly paints pictures far in excess of what's real. I try to capture those images in my work. I'll make the fist coming straight at you larger, bonier, and much more menacing, because I'm dealing with the emotion of fear and not the anatomical properties of the hand. A sword can kill, and I will exaggerate those qualities of a sword that will emphasize its ability to kill. The size, the hardness, the coldness of the metal, the point, the sharpened edge, whatever it takes to spell out that emotion best. Extend this thinking into the full range of emotional experiences, and you have Frazetta's complete painting philosophy. It's what imaginative art is or should be all about. Frazetta's working procedure is completely without discipline. Like many professionals, he relies on deadlines to force him into action, usually leaving himself with entirely too little time to tickle it up. Many of his award-winning covers were done overnight, a remarkable feat when you consider that he paints in oils directly from his imagination, and without any reference other than the mirror he keeps at his side to check things out. He only works on wood, masonite, or canvas panel for their ease in handling and storing. A pause for a cup of coffee, if it is late at night, or a quick game of stickball with his sons, if it is in the afternoon, is all the time he needs to separate himself from the work for a fresh look later on. If the second appraisal is positive, he'll begin to add the details and touches of realism, which are his trademark. If he is unsatisfied with how the work is progressing, he will paint over the areas that bother him, or, less frequently, begin a totally new painting. It is not rare that Frazetta will look again at a painting that has come back to him after its initial use as a book jacket and decide to paint over figures, backgrounds, or whatever else he feels could be improved. I'm really only interested in the original, the artist discloses. As an illustrator, I know I should be more concerned about how it looks in reproduction, but I find that a rather restrictive measure while painting. I'd rather aim for a good painting and hope that the plate makers come through. What confuses the Frazetta cult, the number and dedication of his army of loyal fans, is staggering. More than anything else is the fact that he prefers to play baseball than to draw, that he would rather observe a field of color or a forest in shadow than paint it, and that he needs his privacy more than adulation. For these reasons, he seldom, if ever, appears at the comic and science fiction conventions that have become big business of late, attracting fans and collectors from all over the world. Thanks to the efforts of his wife Ellie, the business end of the Frazetta enterprise, reproductions of his work, portfolio, and posters sell in the tens of thousands, and the rare originals that find their way to market start at 4 figures. His personal promotion would, of course, hype sales greatly, but that just isn't Frank Frazetta. He's not shy. He's warm and friendly. He isn't above it all. He's genuinely pleased his work is so well received. It's simply a matter of separating the man from the work. The man is very much a part of this world. The work is in a world by itself. Frazetta was born and raised in the Sheepshead Bay section of Brooklyn, and displayed great natural ability in both drawing and athletics at a very early age. As he matured, so did his abilities, leaving him a difficult choice to make, in his late teen years, to accept offers to play professional baseball or to continue full-time as a comic book artist. He had been drawing professionally in this field for over 2 years while still attending high school. Frazetta opted for the latter, rationalizing that a career in sports is limited. You're too old while you're still young. In art, you're as old as your imagination. His earliest published work was mostly in the animated vein, but as he became a full-time freelancer, he began to take on the realistic type of comic work. He continued playing ball, however, and more professional offers came the following year after his batting .487, compiling most hits and most runs scored and winning the Most Valuable Player Award for the highly regarded Parade Grounds League in the shadows of Ebbets Field, home of his beloved Brooklyn Dodgers in Flatbush. What followed then was to change the course of Frazetta's life. He was offered the opportunity to paint the covers for the new edition of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan. Those covers gave Frazetta the chance to really do a job on the kinds of ideas that had been bottled up inside me for years. They also gave me the chance to make my living painting. His paintings prove how atmosphere can play a bigger part in telling the story than the subject itself, how to create mood, how to make certain passages come forward or go back with just a hint or suggestion of mass or tone. Sure, I struck out sometimes, he says, but the only way to avoid striking out is to never get up at bat. Being careful would take the fun out of art for me. And what of influences and inspiration? I love the old masters for their unquestionable abilities in composition and draftsmanship. Frazetta summarizes, but they were reserved, restrained by their time. I loved the Impressionists for their color and daring. They were obviously less restrained. Today there's no restraint, and I'd be a fool to restrict myself in any way to please fans, critics, or peers. I'm an artist of my time, and that's the only thing I can be. I find barns boring, so why paint barns? Barns already exist. They don't need me to create them. What I do create doesn't exist, and to me that's a lot more exciting, in league with hitting a home run. Frank died in 2010. I never had a chance to go here, but someday I hope I will get that chance. I really do want to go here once before I die. He has his own museum. It's in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. It's run by his children. Anyway, I've been thinking about this guy pretty much my whole life. He's one of the reasons why I got my degree in art. He really got me excited about it all. Anyway, that's it. I just wanted to show you the genesis of modern-day fantasy art, and this is where it all begins with Frank Frazetta. Thanks a lot. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.